Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another Tales of Web3. Today we are recording season 3, episode 15, with my chat bro, Chris, the co-founder and CEO of Plume Network. How's it going, brother?
Good. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it, and looking forward to getting into it today.
Yes, I'm super excited. Obviously, the first question, I love for you to share a little bit more about yourself. How do you jump into the crypto rabbit hole? And
Yeah, totally.
the most interesting stuff for you is that I know a lot of like these guys are doing RWAs. They're from TradFi. You,
Yes.
on the other hand, you're a fucking DJ. And you know how to solve problems that are in like a very unique way. So I will obviously love to dive deep on the origin story of Plume as well. But
Yeah,
to start,
totally.
yourself, please.
Maybe real quick. Background. Look, I've been kind of in startups and entrepreneurship stuff for a while. I've been doing a lot of. I kind of grew up in, in a bad. I kind of grew up in enterprise software, doing more like business software stuff. And really was kind of the result of like fucking up consumer stuff many times. We've done a couple different consumer projects, and like I remember we were in college and trying to do a couple different companies, and we did all of the big problems that you have in college, right? Which is like food delivery and dating and like all kinds of dumb shit, and all of them went to zero. And at the end, we said, look, like we need to do something that at least if there's one user and it's me, that's okay still. So let's just build something for ourselves. We ended up turning this into doing some business software instead. And when we did that, it kind of took off and right time, right place. I ended up selling the
Awesome.
company 6 months later and got a bunch of users and everything. So it was great. Then after that, again, like it kind of fell into it, ended up, running product at this next company. We took it public later. And so it was the whole thing and, really learned how to like build a company that way. And I got sucked into crypto at my next place. I was, a good friend of mine asked me to come help run product for this company. It's called Rainforest QA. And Rainforest is kind of distributed QA product, right? And so you have a community around the world of 60,000 people that when you push a button to hit an API, they come test your software, right? So you can sort of outsource your QA team, right?
Yes.
And it was like an early version of Scale AI, but a vertical thing, right? And the number one thing that they asked for at the time was they said, look, like, they're all in Latin America, Eastern Europe, Africa, and these places. And they all said, look, you keep like this is great working here because the consistency to QA that you don't have in other things, right? So they could treat it like a full-time job. The problem is they kept saying, look, you keep making me off ramp to my shitty native currency, right? I'd rather take BTC and ETH.
Yes.
And I was
yes,
like, oh
of
shit,
course.
okay, I guess it's a real thing. We'd spend so much time building off ramps into all these different currencies, such a pain in the ass to manage. So like, okay, cool, it's a lot easier. So we just did that. And it was right around DeFi summer. And so I just kind of started watching, and I feel like the minute you start, doing stuff in DeFi, and it was that time, like the minute you put, you start doing stuff in DeFi summer, you're like farming, it just like rots your brain. And like you can't do anything else, and like the minute, you kind of like went
Of course,
down
of
that
course.
road, I just got sucked into it. And so I was doing a bunch of yield farming, all that kind of nonsense. And then, when like Ohm and all that stuff came around, I was one of the first, like one of the early people when Olympus and all that. And so like, got sucked up in all the Ohm forks and just like you said, when you put like $1,000 into something, it turns like 100 grand in 2 days. Again, nothing's fun anymore except that. And so we just kind of got sucked into crypto. And it was very hard to like do regular business stuff after, And so
100%.
at the time, a couple of my companies started to do really well as an angel investor, and so I got recruited to do venture. So I was doing venture investing, Series A, B, and C stuff. And while I was there,
for
the world
crypto,
went to hell.
or for
No, I was doing classic. I was doing B2B stuff. So yeah.
got it.
Series A, B, and C, doing like $5 to $30 million checks, leading rounds, taking board seats, that kind of nonsense. And I fucking hated it, to be honest. I was actually okay at it,
Are you good at it?
but
Are you good at it? You're good
I
at
was
it.
actually okay at it. Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see. When the marks come at the end, when the companies come around. But at least like the early picks were good.
Nice.
But I was still just like doing crypto, both retail and a bunch of like friends stuff, and just helping companies and helping friends out. And basically at the end, when the world went to hell and FTX blew up, and everything was at zero, they were basically, and then after we had fucking Luna and all this kind of shit, and it was all bad. And I remember thinking, okay, it's either everything is fucked, right? And it's all going to zero, and it was all bullshit, or like now's the most misunderstood time for it, right? And now's the best
Yes.
time to sort of get
To
into it,
build.
and like and to get into it, right? Exactly. So I said, okay, look, time to get out of here and let's focus on that. And so I took off, ended up coming with my co-founder Teddy and Eugene, and we were really focused on thinking about just growing crypto. It just came to us very simply at the time that there was so much shit happening in crypto, but it all felt, I mean, you remember this time, like this is, about 2 years ago now, it was just like the depths of the bear market. It was just constant nonsense. And it was sort of like, we're all finding new ways to rob each other on different chains, and that's all I was doing is the same shit everywhere, but there was nothing new. And I
Yes,
just kind of felt
sir.
like all these micro optimizations in DeFi. And actually, I think right now there's actually been a lot more change, which has been great. But like at that time, there was fucking nothing. I just remember being like, okay, like we can either do this and just be one piece of the puzzle, or we can try and grow crypto. So our orientation was to go down that road, and we kind of looked at a bunch of different things. And I'd seen a bunch of RWA stuff as an angel, and they were all fucking trash. And I invested in a few of them. That's how I knew they were trash. And then Teddy had seen, and Teddy was at Binance at the BNB chain, and he had saw a bunch of RWA projects also trying to join and deploy on the BNB. And so we just wanted to talk to them. And I always think the job of the founder is very simple. It's just a spot change. Right, whether the change is good, bad, it's important enough or whatever is a different question, but at least it's a spot change. And I think it was very clear there was some change on the horizon.
Yes.
And so we just spent some time kind of going into it and talking to them and doing it. And I think, going to what you said, I think the advantage and differentiation for us was that everybody in RWAs, right, comes from the trad world, right? They're sort of thinking about this from a trad
TradFi
perspective.
people build TradFi product for fucking TradFi people on chain.
Yeah, exactly,
That'd be
exactly. You've heard it before. Right? That's exactly what I always say. It's like it's just trad people doing trad things, And we were coming out to this from a crypto perspective, which is like, look, these things matter. They make sense to me. I'm down with 5% yield at times and be able to rotate in and out and do things like that and be able to kind of do more things. But I don't want to do all this nonsense. I want to KIC and like do all this bullshit. Like it has to be crypto. So let's figure out how to do that and bring things into crypto in that way and focus on a crypto native version first, and then we can build from there. And so that was our orientation and take. And so for zoom out today. Today we're the largest community ecosystem in RWAs. We have a couple hundred projects building on us. We've got
I
several
check
million
out the
wallets and
landing
users.
page. I check out the ecosystem. It's pretty impressive, man.
Oh
We
yeah,
will
yeah.
talk
No,
about later how you find these apps, because I do think whoever out there are building a chain, whatever kind of chain it is, the hardest thing is finding good devs that are
yes,
dedicated in. So we'll talk about that later, right? But just want to
totally.
mark that. Just want to mark that.
Totally. Yeah, no, exactly. So today that's when we focus on this community ecosystem. I think we're the first, like what we call like a full stack ecosystem, right? Where we build software, we take the liquidity partners, we have community, we have ecosystem, right? And a chain all built together to customize for this use case, right? And bootstrap it. And then of course, we're also the only ones to really think about, again, our orientation is to grow crypto. So, we're focused on bringing and bridging things to other ecosystems, and we're part of Layer Zero from day one to kind of bring things to Solana, Injective,
Nice.
all kinds of places as well. So again, like our viewpoint and sort of our like how we built this, it sort of shows up in the product itself and how we're doing things. And so, again, like our hope is very simple. By bringing things in, we should grow all of crypto. And if all of crypto grows, we all win, including Plume, right? So we should all be
Let's
happy that
fucking
way.
go. That's
Right.
fucking. I love that. I was supposed to like ask you more about like the personal side of things, but like right now I'm just super excited about Plume. So let's dive into that directly. Later on,
Yeah, sure.
we can go back to your journey and stuff. So for Plume, like the really interesting thing about the traditional RWAs that you described, right, in your previous podcast is like what we just talked about, right? TradFi people come to do TradFi stuff, which
Yep.
obviously including the problem of you have to have at least $5 million if you wanted to participate in any of those projects. And there's KIC and stuff like that. I do see there's definitely a bad side of it, right? Which means no retail users will be able to participate, right? 99% of the population just wiped out for a second.
Yep.
But like, what
Exactly.
are the virtuals in that though? Because there's definitely a reason why they do that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Because obviously I know you're a DGen, but there gotta be other DGens out there when designing these systems. Like this gotta be a problem that they thought about too, right? So first question is, what is the virtuals of them doing this? And second, like what is the hardest thing for you guys when you are focusing extremely on retail side of things, right?
Yep.
Is it like the regulatory side of things that really is hard? Or like, so the second part is like the hardest thing for you guys when you use this strategy to bootstrap this entire new initiative, opening up new doors for RWAs for retail users. So
Totally. Yeah. Look, I think, Teddy, Eugene, and I, we don't come from this world. We don't come from TradFi. We don't come from finance. We come from RWAs, and so we don't know any of this shit. And I think that's like our benefit. Like I think most people are a prisoner of their own view, and they're a prisoner of their own perspective, and so they get caught in different areas where we don't get caught because we just don't fucking know, you know. And it's very simple. Like I would say this, look, my last company was in QA, right? And I always say, if there's a new QA company, I'm for sure going to miss it, you know, because I'm so negative on everything, or I've seen all the problems. I know everything about it now. And so it's very hard for me to see anything outside of that frame. And there's for sure going to be a huge QA company comes out. They're going to meet me. They're going to pitch me. I'm going to tell them, you're stupid, you're wrong, don't do this. And it's going to be $1 trillion company, and I'm going to be wrong. It's for sure going to happen. You know, and I think that's what happened with this RWA stuff, right? It's like, the truth is, we just don't know shit about regulation and compliance and all this stuff. I know a lot of it now, right? But like at the time, we didn't know anything. And so we just did it the way we thought, which is, I think, focus on the end user, which is like, the question was always like, actually, I don't know about these rules. And so the question is, why not? Why can't we do this? Why can't we do this? Can't we do this? And we'll just, okay, cool. Like, we'll just build something to do this instead and go around, right? And I always go back to this. You know, Uber, at the end of the day, right, was illegal for many years. Right?
Dude, that's the point I wanted to mention. Regulation always catch up with the innovation, not vice versa. You'll always be the innovator first.
That's exactly right. Right. Look, regulation, right, at the very core, it's meant to protect the people. That's the whole point, right?
Yes.
Even all these rules today is meant to protect the retail user from getting scammed from pink sheets. That's like 90% of the reason why, right? But like, it actually doesn't work at all, right? And just so you go, going to Uber again, right? It actually turns out it's just mostly regulatory capture, and it's mostly nonsense. And if people want it, the rules will change. Very simple, right? And so this is the same thing, in my opinion. If people want this and people move, it will change. It's already happening with stables, right? With BTC and ETH, all these, when people want them, they move, right? The rules are just it's just warning signs. It's not yes, no. And I think a lot of people, when they come through, they see it as like, here's the world I can operate in. And they end up designing within that world, but that world fucking sucks. You know, and so it doesn't get any better. So you have to think outside of that and think more broad. I think a lot of people in this world think about this, you know, sort of like, you know, very US first and US only, right? That's one thing. And then within the confines of the existing world. And I think, again, if you follow the money, right, it would lead you, like, it's very rational to kind of focus on TradFi. I totally get it, right? Because if you look at all the money in the world in TradFi, in the financial world, it would point you to Wall Street.
100x, right? Market cap.
Totally. It makes total sense. But also, the very simple truth is this. If you were doing a new startup, right, and you told an investor or your friend or whoever, my first customer is going to be one of the biggest companies in the world, BlackRock, you know, people would think you're retarded, you know, and that's what everyone's doing. It doesn't make any fucking sense. You know, that's never how any company's ever been made, ever. You always start bottoms up, right? Or in the mid-market, or you have to gain real adoption and test the product and get it. And then you force the trad folks and force the larger companies to get it. If you start there, you're fucked from the gate. You know, and so I just don't understand how people think of this. And so I think that's the distinction with us. Like I think we're very focused on just working backwards from the end user and thinking about like and the end user, I think, happens to be us.
Bottom up approach.
Yes,
always
exactly.
start with bottom up, not top.
Exactly. And you can build things after. Look, take a look at the iPhone. I think the cleanest example is the iPhone versus the BlackBerry, right? The BlackBerry, right, was built for the enterprise, was built for big companies, built for institutions, right? Ended up being a piece of shit. Right? It's like, you know, it didn't work, right? It worked for a little bit because they were just, they were focused on the wrong thing. And there were all this kind of stuff. You have SSO, you've got SAML, you've got, like, you know, the keyword, you've got email, you've got Outlook, blah, blah, blah. All this nonsense. Where, as you look at today, right, the iPhone started bottom first, and everyone used to shit on the iPhone because they're saying, oh, it's just a consumer device. There's no like real business tools. It's no integration. There's none of this nonsense, right? And over time, they got every single person in the world to use the iPhone, right? At least in a lot of parts of the world. And as it went up, right, then they just added that shit. It wasn't that hard. Turns out, big surprise. Adding fucking integration is easy, you know? And so like they just did that, right? And once everyone's using it, then of course now every company uses iPhones, right? And the BlackBerry's fucking dead, right? No one remembers this shit, right? And so that to me is like how to think about it, right? There's no company ever in history, right, that has done real meaningful change that hasn't started bottoms up, right? And you have to start there. And the bottoms up is always looks the same, but looks like a toy, right? The iPhone at the time looked like a toy compared to the BlackBerry, if you thought about it from a business perspective, right? Oh, it's like you can watch YouTube, you got a beer drinking app, like all kinds of dumb shit, right? And over time, it became very popular, right? And it became the thing. But at the time, it feels weird, it's different, right? Because what the BlackBerry did was it literally took the desktop and it put it onto a phone, right? You had a physical keyboard. You could do all the same things. It was like very similar, right? Whereas the iPhone reimagined it from the ground up, right? Location, primary thing, full screen, full touchscreen, right? Having video and all these things embedded into it, right? It was a different device that ended up becoming how people ended up doing things today, right? Versus how it was done there. And if you think about where things are going, I just don't see a world in which everyone is going to sit through a fucking ridiculous KYC process and try and get, like, people just want to do what people are doing in crypto. They want to swap into things. They want to hold it. They want to get out. They want to move. And money wants to move where it wants to go.
They want to earn earn
to it.
money. They want to earn yield. That's what it
Exactly.
is.
Very simple, right? And so we should let people do that. And look, you know what turns out? The people that have assets that are productive, they want the fucking money too, right? To get more yield. So like they want to meet each other, they want to find each other, right? And there's ways to do it today, and the existing world doesn't work, and so we have to build a new one.
Beautiful. Quick question. Why people should, in case like in a scenario where the user experience, right, of buying an RWA is exactly as seamless as doing swaps, doing yield farming on DeFi protocols. Why should people buy or go to the RWA side of things instead of like sticking to traditional USDE, Pendle, stuff like that?
Totally. And look,
because the yield is still pretty high, right? 10% a
for
year.
sure.
That's not bad at all.
For sure. No, look, I think again, going back to it, we're crypto people first, and we start that way. And so the way that means is we're also not RWA maxis, right? Like I'm not like a person who says, "Oh, only do RWAs, let's only do trad shit," and blah blah blah. You know, look, I'm still farming a bunch of nonsense today. You know, like I still do all kinds of shit, and you should, right? When the market's up, you want to hold tokens. When the market's down, sometimes you want to rotate into things, right? There's a lot of problems with like a lot of these assets today, right? One is it's inconsistent. Right. So everyone knows that like when the pool is small, right, you can get a screenshot where the yield says 300%, and it exists for like 10 minutes. And the minute someone deposits it goes back down to 5%. We've seen that a trillion times, right? That's number one. It's not consistent. And so the thing goes up and down, up and left and right. It's hard to predict, right? Number two, these pools are not big. That's the reality, right? Like, you can do 50, like even go to the largest Pendle pool today. It's maybe 200 mil. Right?
200 mil.
It's not small.
Somewhere around that, yes.
But it's not huge either, right? And so if you want to do real size, you can't do it either, right? And so if we want to grow, because look, fundamentally, Pendle's about yield stripping. It's about selling the futures and stuff. Like there's just an upper limit to where it can go, right? I think Pendle's incredible. I think USD is incredible. A lot of these things are great, right? It's just a different style of user, right? And if we think about the totality of the world, right? We've got 8 billion people on chain, 8 billion people today, right? It's like 5 million on chain. Really, right? Like everyone has these bullshit numbers,
and then,
right?
And then 1 million probably use Pendle, or like even less.
Yeah, I think it's way less. Yeah, exactly. But like, exactly, the world is tiny still. We need so many different. That's why people always talk about like, oh, this is bad for crypto. This is bad for crypto. No, it's all good for crypto because look, it's so fucking small. We need every possible thing to bring people in, and everyone has these tiny different differences in what they want. Some people want hyper stable, boring fucking yield. Some people want degen shit. Some people want this. Let's have everything possible, right? And have a bunch of doors open and have people come in. So I think it's not about one or the other. I think they both should exist and they both will exist. And then we should be able to go back and forth and they serve different people, different use case, different users, right? And ultimately, right, you want them all to blur together, right? Even USDE, right? They've realized that you need something stable, right? That's why they have USDB now, right? Right. And you need more size there because there's an upper limit to where this stuff goes, right? And so if we want to grow crypto, if we want to add more things, we just need another dimension. Doesn't mean the existing thing's bad. I think it's great. And that's what a lot of people in Artemis get wrong. They're like, oh, it's like nonsense. It's bullshit. It's all like fake stuff. No, it's fucking awesome, right? Crypto is great the way it is today, right? We shouldn't, it'll keep going and keep doing its thing. This is just to add to another
dimension.
That's all it is,
complete new. Okay.
Correct. And it has to be the same world. I think we're very fixed. It has to be the same world, the same people, right? Because we're not trying to build a separate world for fucking trad people to do shit on chain. It doesn't make any sense. Right? It should be all together. The whole point of this, right? Even the universal computer, right? It's the world computer, but we should all be able to do the same thing at the same time, right? That's the whole fucking point, right? And so this idea that these are two different things, it's not, right? When I go to work, I'm like a fucking business person. When I go home, I'm a consumer. We're all the same people, right? It doesn't matter. And so like, there is no like trad versus consumer shit, right? They're all the same people. And so we should build one thing so we can all do the same thing at the same time.
I fucking love it. Like if you guys are doing from the top, the bottom up approach, right? What is the hardest thing that you guys are trying to solve right now? Is it adding distribution to retail users? Is it funding more projects to build toward this vision? What is it?
Totally. It's a great question. I think it's two things. One is messaging and just the story is not very clear, right? And
wait, how? I think from my perspective, I think it's super fucking clear. You're just making RWAs like fun, like for DJs, for people to.
Good. I'm glad. But I think when you come to it, like I think if you're in the game, like I mean you're in crypto, so you know this stuff and you can see the difference and you kind of know. But if you're like 50,000 feet away and you don't really understand what's going on, you just like look at a high level. It's not very clear what these things mean. Even look at all these articles and reporters, right? They're fucking stupid, all of them, right? None of them understand. Like none of them understand anything going on with this stuff, right? They're just grifting like a big story, a big narrative, a big logo. They get every story wrong, right? And so like even the reporters who supposedly should know what's going on, they can't do it. They can't tell, right? That's a problem outside of RWAs, and all of crypto reporters are fucking wrong about everything, to be honest, right? So that's one issue. But I think the second thing, right, at a more detailed level, you said, I think it's the builders, right? And getting people to understand how to do this, because, you know, if you're in crypto today, it's the same reason why why Plume had an opportunity to build, right? Because if you're in crypto, right, as a founder, like it's way easier. Like dealing with the real world's a fucking pain in the ass, you know? Like I have to go fucking talk to people. I got to go like play golf with these fucking execs. I got to like eat.
Are
I
you
got to do all this like
serious?
nonsense.
Dude,
You know,
I
I got to do.
cannot imagine if you're like a crypto founder, you have to play. Oh my
You
God.
know, like I'm doing like I got to do like enterprise sales shit. You got to like really talk to these motherfuckers. You know, I had to put on a suit the other day. You know, I haven't done that in a long time. You know, and so like it's a fucking pain in the ass. You know, and if you're a crypto founder, it's much easier, right? And the whole point of being a crypto founder is permissionless innovation. I can just go spin up
100%.
some fucking Simpson protocol I want, grab some LSTs and LRTs, claim fucking 2 billion TVL, and move on in my life. You know, like, there's a million ways to do it, right? But like so the orientation and the incentive for the founder, right? Not even one of economics, but just like what's the fastest way to build and what's the most fun way to build and most native to me is going to be just going to crypto native, right? And so sort of making and I'm not a believer that we can sort of like, oh, you should build on TradFi shit instead. That's not the way, right? We have to make the TradFi shit as easy to build on as it is crypto native stuff, right? Because developers are going to always go to the easiest thing to build. That's for sure, right? You're going to go to where the tools are the best. You're going to build stuff and just keep going, right? And so we have to make it just as easy to build and innovate on TradFi stuff and RWAs as it is crypto stuff and crypto native tools, right? Because today, again, like I can just, if I literally just like launch a protocol and it's interesting, a bunch of money will flood in. Right. And I can just go
Yes.
grab, you know, this and this and this, and I can lend and borrow and I can just create new things. And like, again, I can literally launch a protocol by myself for 2 people in like fucking 15 days. And if it works, God bless, we'll see. You know, it's very simple, right? Versus the trad shit, it's like fucking months and months and months of pain, right, to get there. So that cycle we have to shrink. And so today, that's the trickiest thing. You know, how do we get more people to do this? Especially the ones that have the right mentality, right? Meaning the people that are used to people that like are okay with a 10-month build cycle are used to a 3-year build cycle, right? And so they're like very slow and they don't get it and like they build the wrong thing. And so you want to find this balance between someone who's okay, who like ships on a daily basis and builds in a crypto native way, right? But can do with RWAs, right? I think that's the tricky thing today. So that's probably the sort of like hardest thing we're doing. So, you know, that's why we had some, you know, eco fund come out. We're going to do a bunch of accelerator
I
stuff and
saw
like,
that.
you know,
I
again,
saw that.
and also we're going to build a bunch of software ourselves to like, again, abstract this all away, right? Because again, it should be as simple as clicking a few buttons and writing a couple lines of code, especially now with fucking Vibe clicking all this nonsense. You should be able to spin this shit up instantly, right? If you're going to do RWA stuff, you know, you shouldn't have to like, you know, suffer through calling fucking JP Morgan and BlackRock and trying to get them on the phone and ask them about this and this and this and pay them $10 million to work. It doesn't make any sense, right? So anyway, that to me is for sure the hardest part of the game right now.
100%. For the first part, like the reporter and the messaging side of things, I do think I agree with you because I've been reading these like journals, blogs, and stuff like that. And if I standing myself like in a like Web2 outsider point of view, like the second I finish that article, I would think, okay, I probably want to invest this with my broker from Web2 instead of going to this Web3 company, and because it's fucking bullshit. It's very sketchy. In terms of like what you guys are building, I actually think you also talk about like how you fucking hated like you know doing golf and wearing suits, stuff like that. I actually think
Yes.
that's a good thing because like you are taking that burden, right? If you are the person who wanted to bring opening up like a complete new door, a new stream of money flow into crypto, and I think that's the burden on your shoulder. But I think that's a good burden. It's a good burden to have, you know.
Totally. Look, I think I think the good thing is I used to do enterprise software, so I know how to do this shit. You know, like I know exactly how to do this stuff. It's like, you know, I've done this a million times. And look, I actually think the hardest burden, right? I think, look, I agree. And of course, I'd love to like, you know, glaze myself. So I'd say, yeah, of course, I think we're doing a great job of trying to help everybody. But like, I think the harder burden is when you talk to the people at BlackRock, when you talk to people at JP Morgan, when you talk to people at fucking Wisdom Tree and Fidelity, and like a lot of those people are real crypto people, you know? Like they come from Consensus, they come from Galaxy, they like really understand crypto, they know where things are going,
but
and they're taking on the burden.
They have
Well,
predatory too.
that too. But they're also taking on the burden of going into the company and try to convince
Yeah.
their boss every fucking day to do some crypto shit, and that's a fucking pain in the ass too, So I think without them, we wouldn't have any of this, So I appreciate all of them, like the idea, like just imagine you or me fucking joining BlackRock to do some fucking crypto. There's no way, I'd rather kill myself, And so like I think it's just very tricky, and so I'm glad they're doing it. And like without them, there's no way without them as the internal champion there to push this shit ahead and know how to interact with us and be able to convince them to do things more crypto-like. Like there's no way any of this would work.
I do
So
think
for
this
sure,
is a great thing. Like it's good that we have people who understand us, our world, inside these companies. Because like you
yes,
actually shared previously, right? So it's a pretty hot take that I really liked. You said the guys from like BlackRock, they don't give a shit about like bringing like money from like to Web3, right? They're only
correct. They
looking
don't.
forward to grow their fucking AUM, right? And
Yes,
then
they're
like
they're grifting us. That they're for sure grifting us. There's no question.
and the other interesting thing you mentioned is everybody can tokenize any kind of stuff, right? It's never about the supply side. It's always about the buy side, right?
Yes, for sure.
And then like the biggest problem that we have right now is we don't have enough buyers. Right?
Yes,
We don't have enough buying power. But
that's
like
right.
that as well.
That's right. Yeah, no, I think anyone in meme coins knows this too, right? It's
Like
easy to spin up.
you can bump like a market cap of like
Yeah,
a million
exactly.
or
Exactly. Anyone who does shitters knows this instantly. The market cap FTV means nothing. It's the liquidity pool that matters. And that's what it's the liquidity pool, the volume, right? The number of traders, the number of holders. That's what matters, right? And so if you look at that for any of these assets, it's always fucked. There's always nothing here, right? Like there's nothing happening RWS yet. Because of the incentives, because reporters like pick up these stories and people on CT things, so token prices go up. It's easy to be like, oh, let me tokenize some big piece of real estate, and bring that on chain. We're talking $10 billion of stuff. And look, I'm guilty. I've done it too. So, I'm not free of blame, but like, it's easy to say, let's tokenize $10 billion of stuff and bring it on chain. It's all a fucking big thing, and it's always nonsense. If you look at DeFi Llama, it's fucking $4,000 in TVL or some nonsense. There's no one actually using this shit. And then they'll tell you, oh, it's off-chain buyers. It's like, so what the fuck's the point of doing it on-chain? It's a joke, So it's all bullshit, and it's mostly nonsense. And like you said, people think that Larry Fink is coming to save us. He's not. Larry Fink doesn't give a fuck about us, dude. Larry Fink is trying to grift us all, dude. Larry Fink is trying to rob us blind, So he's talking about this shit all day to pump prices, to sell his customers more crypto shit. That's what he cares about. He cares about Larry Fink, dude, And so, that's the thing we always get wrong here. We think that TradFi is coming, it's going to save us, everything like that. It's fucking bullshit, But it is happening, and there's a way to use it to our advantage, But if we sit there and glaze glare all day, like that's a bad thing, That's not going to go anywhere, It's going to trap us.
As long as
like
those stuff can actually flow in and open up access for retail users, I do think there's a good chance.
Yes.
And you guys are trying to make that happen, right?
Yes, exactly.
This is awesome. All right, let's talk about ecosystem. So I was actually streaming through the ecosystem page, and to be honest, I'm impressed because like oftentimes you go to these chains website, you saw the ecosystem, right? There's obviously a lot of them, but like the native apps are really less, right? It's basically all bridge, swap, and wallet partners. But for you guys, there's
totally.
actually, I do think more than 10 or 20 like native apps that are actually building toward like the stuff that you're talking about. Like I would love to pick your brain around how you team actually find teams that are aligning with this vision and build, right? It's definitely not through hackathons, right? Because I don't think hackathons give you the right builder. So how did you guys find those people?
Honestly, God, I think we're just lucky. Is a big part of it, right? Is the initial start, because I think it's a combination of right place, right time, right story, right message. That allows this, and then we can talk about where to go. But I think that's the fundamental piece. At the end of the day, if it's fucked, doesn't matter what you do, no one's going to come build. Like that. That's the short story, right? If the chain sucks or the narrative is shit, doesn't matter what you do. Right.
100%.
Like you're cooked from the gate. So I think that's the foundational piece. I think for us, we're very lucky that a few of these big stories in RWAs played out the right way, right? We were right that the ETF would be a big thing. We were right that the stablecoin would continue to be a big deal. We were right that like the world would continue to go to shit, and like people would want real things and people want crypto and people, the instability is the thing, right? So I think all of those things end up being correct. So that's the fundamental piece. The second piece, how do you find these sort of like more native folks? I think a lot of it is just trying to understand who they are. right? I've actually been surprised, like, I mean, anyone who's done like normal stuff too outside of Web3, um, you usually think from the customer first and you think from their perspective, right? And you
Yes,
usually try and
yes.
understand who they are, right? And like, what are your problems? How do I solve them? How do I make it better? And in Web 2, right, people spend so much time trying to like build solve the tiniest problem for someone and get like $2, and
Yes,
they get no
yes.
money, right? But that's the thing. At least the orientation is correct. Let's solve let's identify who the customer is and solve a problem for them. In crypto, especially at the chain level, right, and the sort of infra level, that's not how people think at all. Right. Everyone's just like, look, you work for me. Right. And like, I'm the chain, I'm the fucking daddy here. So I'll just tell you what to do and I'll give you money and then you're going to be my bitch. Like that's most of what they say. Right. And I think a lot of the new ones are a lot better for what it's worth, but like historically, that's like
Wait, are you
my
guys the
feeling with
daddy
it.
too? Do you think you guys are the daddy? You're not the daddy,
No,
man.
no, definitely not. Definitely not. And so like that's what people think. I think that's historically my sort of my feeling and how I've seen these kinds of things, and like how I've experienced this, versus I think like the way we see it is like, what are the problems for the founders today? How do we solve them? Like, what can we do to help them? And all I'm trying to do is help them and like figure out and when you boil it down to a few things, it's always a few things. One is technology and tooling. Right. Sometimes people need, especially for us, where you interact a lot with the real world. Right. And some of these people are like, take like one of our first people was doing like, was solar farms. Right. And like mineral rights and oil. Right. And like, it's not like they're
That's
not even
cool.
like crypto people. They're not even computer people. They're fucking like oil people. They don't understand how to use computers at all, So like trying to get them to like do shit like, so like at the simple point, like technology and tooling, and that's the first problem for them. Right. Number two is if you're already here and you have a product and you have a protocol and you have and you have something going on. The second question is mostly about liquidity, right, or distribution.
Liquidity. Yes.
Right. And distribution is also a problem. And so it's really just identifying these things and then going out and saying, okay, how can we solve these for different people? How can we like bring it together? And so today, that's why we built the way we have. Like one, we built a bunch of software for people to use for free. Right. Number two is we went out and found a bunch of liquidity partners to try and like, bootstrap these things. We can't do them for everybody. Right. Because there's only so much, but we can
Yes.
at least try and get more in there. And third, from a distribution, that's why we're like so fucking loud about everything. We're honestly like constantly tweeting. That's why we have this big community, the fucking Plume goons and all this kind of shit. Right. All of that is meant to like help distribution. And that's why for all of our protocols, we can grow their social presence, we grow their user account, grow their story, right? Grow the fucking transactions, all these things. And so that's the kind of story is, sort of focusing on that. And through there, I think you end up finding a couple people that are just like excited to work with you. And like we were just lucky to find some people that were hyped about the story and hyped about direction where we're going. And they saw that I think when you do these things and focus on that, we've made a lot of mistakes too. We're not perfect, but as we were trying to help them do these things, I think they saw the results and they saw momentum from us. And those things come together. And so, what, like, if you're committed, like I'm committed, let's fucking do this together. And we can really help. And we'll go out and, again, we can't solve everyone's problems for them. I got a lot of my own
Yes.
problems that I got to solve first, but, like we can't solve everyone's problems, but we can try and help them as much as possible and find people that are really aligned to the story and where we're going,
Awesome.
So.
First question, like you mentioned about some mistakes when working with these ecosystem projects. Can you name a few, one or two, that are really, really, I'd say, valuable for what you guys learned through the process?
Yeah, totally. I think,
And sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. A second question
totally.
is like, imagine I'm an owner of a solar farm in Midwest US. How are you gonna pitch me and onboard me?
Yeah, totally.
But like the first part, the mistake part.
Totally. Oh God, there's so fucking many of them. Let's see. Um, I always think for what it's worth, like, it's not like we're better than anyone, I think we've made just as many mistakes, if not more than everyone else. I think we just try and move faster and just try and like, we fuck it up, we just do it again and try it again tomorrow,
Yes.
and we keep the iteration cycle short, and we rev very quickly. I always think, my last company, one of the values was always 1% better a day, which is like, I just want to contain every cycle to one day. That's it. So at the end of the day, we fucking learn and we do it again tomorrow a little bit better. That's it. And through that, we can go fast. And so I think that's the only thing. So when I think about mistakes we've made and like big ecosystem mistakes, I think, I think we've been pretty lucky to overall do a bunch of things pretty well. I think overall, like managing I think grants in general is a whole thing for what it's worth. Like the grants is like a whole thing, and I think it's very tricky to do and hard to do correctly. And you sort of like learn through
there's always
the
this dilemma, right? If you give grants,
Yes.
you don't know if they're here for the vision or for the money.
Exactly.
It's almost impossible for you to determine that.
Yes, exactly. And it's almost like, and sometimes it's genuinely they want to work with you and they just need a grant, and that's okay. And
Yes.
a lot of times they're trying to fucking grant farm you. They're trying to fuck you, and I get it. Again, that's the game. I'm not mad at anyone. I play the same game. I get it. Um, and it's hard to balance those things to understand when to use, and also especially as a newer project, and a smaller project compared to some of like the other folks that are trying to grift RWAs now, that have a lot of money or are willing to spend relentlessly, on dumb shit. It prices us out a lot, and it's hard to compete. And so I think like understanding when to use it, how to use it, right, and how to think about using that as a tool, but not as the backbone of what you're doing is the goal. And it's tricky. Again, we haven't been perfect there. I
Yes.
think we've been, something we did the wrong way, didn't milestone it correctly. How do you align incentives? When to use it, when to not? I think that's a whole thing that we didn't do very well. That we're like getting better at. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is understanding what to bring in house and what not to. And what things are native. Like I'll give you an example, right? I think Bera as an example. They have a ton of native apps, right? And a
Yes.
lot of those projects are Bera themed, Bera aligned, and very Bera.
Yes.
I think they've done a great job with it, right? I think I think it's great. It's a good narrative, consistency, visually, story wise, everything. I think it's good. I think there's also a big problem with that on the other side. If you're Bera, I think you're special. You can do it because they have the cachet, they have the brand, they have the story, right? When you're doing a lot of net new things, though, also, right, is a matter of focus. Bera had a ton of money. I don't. Like we have some money, right? We're not like poor either, but like I didn't raise $100 million, right? And so, like, for us, focus is important. And so, where do you actually spend the time to help people go through this thing? And
Focus.
how do you actually focus? Because a lot of these more attached projects, a lot of them are like incubations almost. You're like really helping them going, and like that's a tremendous amount of time because you got to help them do the whole thing. And so it's just like early stage companies. You always say you got to do one thing well. And in crypto we're like, fuck it, we'll do 50 things poorly. At the same time. And I think that's the challenge. Which is like I think it's for sure stupid to do that. And we've made that mistake too. But you have this race where everyone else is doing it, so you kind of have to keep up. So it's the same thing as grants, where like there's a sort of like arms race that's happening around you, and you know what's right and how to think about it, but you have to also keep up somehow. And so that's the balance. I think of the tricky thing around the ecosystem stuff too is like you have to know where to spend time. I think you have to do it in some places for sure, but you really have to pick your spots, and don't go too aggressive on it because there is no magic, like just because you fucking hire a couple people and like get some people to do some things or some people excited, like unless you really focus on helping them and making it work, it doesn't fucking work. It never does. And so then it ends up being a waste of their time, waste of your time. Everyone's fucking unhappy is stupid. And so I think, again, if you can hire a big eco team, God bless, and like really make it happen. If you can't, you got to pick your spots carefully. And I think, just like any new ecosystem, we again, like Monad has what, $300 million, Bear's people have $100 million, I have 30, and like not even anymore, and so, I think that's a tricky thing for sure. And like a mistake I think a lot of people make.
Thank you for sharing that. In terms of like fundraising, I do think it's super interesting because in crypto, you don't even need to ship that much, right? You can raise
Yes.
$100 million and stuff like that. $300 million for Monad. Like,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
got the chance, will you raise the same amount of money that those big boys did, or would you rather stay focused right now? Because obviously, right, like Barra, like Monad, once they have the money, they can do a lot of the cool shit, right? They can expand the
Yes.
team like crazily, giving money, big size check grants. But there's also a downside, right? Which
Yes.
sometimes making you unable to focus. What do you think
Yes.
about that? And what do you think about your decision?
I'm pretty. I look. I think one thing. I guess, Keanu, I'm look. You can see through the screen. I'm Chinese. I'm fucking super cheap. And I'm, and I'm like, I'm very. I think Teddy and I are like, and you do like very conscious of these things, and we don't like to spend. And I don't like to. One, I'm very careful about the cap table in general. Again, we're not perfect, but like, you know,
I think
um,
that's smart. I do
I
think
think
that's
our
smart.
investors are aligned with us and they're long-term supporters. And like, every one of them, I think we're friends with and we can call to get real help. I've had bad investors before and I don't want to do that. And so I think that's the first thing is like, dilution raising money just for the sake of it is stupid. Like none of this is free. I got to give it back at some point. It's just, just
Yes,
because like,
yes,
just because you raise the
100%.
money doesn't mean it's like coming out of nowhere. Like it has to come back. And so I'm always sort of moderating by what's the scope and size of what's possible and what can we actually return? What do we feel comfortable with? And with the degree of, with a room, like margin for error. So in case we fuck it up, right, that there's still plenty of room to go to make sure we give it back. Right. And then it comes back. Actually, not just like get the money back. They made a case for you. The venture, and maybe
100%.
because I was venture, like I'm like overly sensitive to it, but like the investor like makes a fucking case for you, and they're like batting for you, and they're going internally to like make a case and really supporting you too, And so I always treat that very seriously. And if you're gonna do it for me, like I'll do say I'll take it very seriously. When you give us the money, we're gonna fucking give it back in tenfold, and I'm gonna make the case for you, and we're gonna make it work. So I think that's number one. And so like that, because of that, I don't take money from anybody, and like we don't like go very far. And we've been a little slower about that than others. Although maybe not, we did do 4 rounds in a year. So anyway, there's one. And then number two, though, I think also, again, going down that same path, if you look at the sort of scale and size of what's going on here, right? I think it's very clear, that this opportunity is as big as we thought it was, if not bigger. Like we always knew it was a big opportunity. The question was when and how fast, right? Right. When is it really going to come? And is it 2 years, to 5 years, to 10 years, right? And I think if you look at the world today, it's become very clear that we have a very unique situation. You've got some of the office in the leader of the free world launching shitcoins on Solana. And then what that's done is every other country in the world is panicking. They're trying to figure out what to do around crypto because they're like, this motherfucker's going after it, like we have to beat him to the punch. And so people in Hong Kong and Singapore and Dubai and Latin America, all these places are fucking, I mean, even Malay just fucking ran one up after, like, so anyway, which is not a good one, but like everyone is like getting into crypto now and doing more tokenization, RWA stuff. They're doing it more fundamental because they want to get ahead of it. Right. And so I think it's a very unique point in time where the stars have aligned. We have a year and a half before the midterms, 2 years to run this thing up. And every door is open. Number one. Number two, because of that, all of the big instos are coming in, and the amount of money that we thought was possible, and the opportunity that we thought was possible, is just astronomical. It just couldn't be bigger. And so because
Yes.
of that, we're more open now. I'd say I'm more open to going down that road of like, okay, like let's lean into it and really accelerate. And do we have to? No, we haven't decided on doing anything, but just to say, whereas before I was like, no, we did absolutely not, like I think let's focus, we're doing our thing. Now it's like, okay, like, if the world is open, if the doors are open for a year and a half, we might need to go after it. So we'll find
100%.
out. Yeah.
I also like your mindset, being extremely cautious about like who to sit on your like cap table and stuff like that. Because like for first time founders, like, and especially crypto founders, they tend to raise like the bigger, the better, right? You know what I mean?
Yes.
But
Yeah,
like you've been
100%.
on the other side of the table, so you understand what it means, right? When someone writes your check size, what it
Totally.
means when someone like votes for you internally. Dude, one thing that pumps up in my mind, I actually saw one of your investors on Twitter. He wrote like, whatever Chris do, like in his entire life, he's just gonna always invest in you. I think that's fucking amazing.
Oh,
So
good. I didn't see that. So I
very
appreciate it. I'll have to
impressive,
find out.
very impressive, very impressive.
Uh,
Okay, so imagine I'm a owner of this solar
yep.
farm in Mid East, US, right?
Yep.
You wanted to pitch to me about bringing this, right, tokenizing this asset on Plume. Well, how are you gonna pitch me?
Totally. So look, maybe really quickly, the setup always is this, I think the first question for a solar farm owner is not about where to tokenize, what chain, or what to do. The first question is, do I fucking care?
Yes,
Like,
yes.
yeah,
That's another
like,
question. Like, let's say if I have like hundreds of thousands of dollars yearly revenue, like, why the
yes,
fuck should I care? Right?
exactly.
That's another question.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's the first question for sure, because if not, it's almost certainly they're trying to grift you, right? And they're trying to just like dump shit on retail or dump shit in crypto because they couldn't raise money elsewhere. Right. And so you have to really understand the setup and the dynamics, right? So that's the first piece, right? But look, I think like take a solar owner, right? I think that the question is very simple, which is like, look, what's going well, what's not going well for you today, right? And the solar farm is always the same thing. We are limited by government funding, because it's a big, like we're, and there's a unique area where for a lot of these bigger deals, if you want to raise money for a big project, solar farms are not small, a couple $100 million, right?
Yes.
If you want to do a bunch of them, right? But the problem with a couple $100 million is this. It's the same reason as like doing small deals versus big deal, right? It's just as much work to do a deal for a couple $100 million of solar farms involving the government and rebates and taxes and regulation, all these things to think about, versus doing a fundraise for a huge company, right? Doing a $10 billion
Yeah.
fundraise, and I take 2%. I take 2% of both, right? One is easy, one's hard, one pays more, one pays less, you know? And so
Yes.
I think the setup to even get into it before is I always think this, if we have to pitch, we've already lost, you know? Like we have to, like, I always think, especially when selling, 99% of the work is a setup, you know, to pick your spots right.
1% is the actual pitch,
Yes, the pitch, because
where
the
you
pitch
already know
is
you're gonna win.
totally,
Otherwise, there's
exactly.
no reason to do it.
Exactly. These are just words. Anyone can say them, you know? So it's all about picking your spots. So that's why I haven't even got to like what to say to them. To me, all the work is in figuring out what the dynamics are. Is it adverse selection? Is there a real problem? Why are they actually coming to you? What's, you know, all these different things, right? And once you understand that, then the story is very simple. It's like, look, I already know your problems, right? Like you want to raise more money, right? To do a bunch of stuff. And you don't need it today, you know? Because a lot of the solar farms are fine. They print cash, right? They don't need the
Yes.
money,
Yes.
but they could use more, right? But you've tried to engage these other people to find more, and it's a fucking bitch, and they don't want to do it, or it costs you a bunch of money and it's time, right? And so the way we always find is someone who, like, if the setup is right? If I go to them with these things, I can say, look, I can solve your problems, but it's also not a silver bullet, right? We're not going to go find you $100 million on chain right now, right? And have you go build fucking solar farms for 6 months together. Like, that's not going to happen, right? The way to do
Yes.
it, though, is we'll set you up properly, right? Let's take some existing solar farms that are already there printing cash, right? And doing nothing. And why don't you give that to the community, you know?
Oh.
Why don't you create a liquidity pool around it and create a market first, right? If you want to sell anything, don't go into the market and sell. You have to sell to a market that already exists. But no,
Yes.
there's no market that exists for this shit today. So let's build a market first. You already make a bunch of cash on this thing and print money. I'm not saying you give it up, right? But allow someone to give you money in exchange and begin to give them the yield and build a market around this thing. And once you have a market, now you can do primaries.
You can
Now you can
expand.
fundraise. Now you can grow, right? And
Oh.
I think that story always resonates because everyone comes in with some fucking answer. You know, you can do this. It's always bullshit. You know, when people tell me it's always nonsense, you know, we tell them, look, it's not going to happen. You know, if you want to do this, it's a multi-phase year. It's a long-term game. But once you do it, it's a real thing. There's real money in crypto. There's real potential here. People do want these assets, but nobody wants it in the way that you're used to selling it to them. You have to sell to them the way people want to be sold to. Let them experience the yield. Bring it on chain. Show them how this works first, and then you can do primaries after, right? Because if you build a liquidity pool, right, and take a bunch of these secondaries that are already there, there's no wait time. Why? Who wants to deal with fucking wait time right now? I got to put some money into a fucking random person in fucking Washington that's going to build a solar farm, and eventually I'll get some yield. I'm not fucking doing that, dude. I'll just ape into the next shit. I'll just hold more Farcoin. Like, I think Farcoin's probably going to be better, you know? So, like, that to me is always the question, right? It was like, you have to start
Yes.
this. So that's why the setup is important, right? And that's how you close these deals, in my opinion, right? Because I can tell anyone, I'll go close a few of you right now. I'll tell anybody, hey, you know, I can bring you a couple $100 million in share. It's all bullshit, you know. It's nonsense. You know, I would never. We don't try and promise those things, or you know, try and tell people that kind of shit. You know, and if they want that, it's also the wrong person, because that means they're fucking struggling. They need it,
Yes.
right? Versus
Yes.
someone who's willing to invest, right, and bring these things on and put their own money in and sacrifice their own earnings. You know, they're not losing money, but they're not getting it. You know, they're like committing to this thing, right? I think all of that is still, you know, that's the way to set this up. And so the deal is very easy. You know,
It's pretty smart.
it's just the setup.
Because I think the most important thing is like if you take this approach towards like the Web2 kind of people, they're actually used to it, right? Because they are long-term
Yes,
thinkers. Otherwise, there's no
correct.
reason why I spend a couple $1 million building a solar farm in the first place.
Right,
So they
exactly.
understand
That's
what you're
exactly
talking
right.
about, but crypto
Exactly.
people doesn't understand that, right? So you
That's
create a
exactly
market
right.
first, and then, dude, I think that's pretty genius. That pretty blows my mind. I like it.
Yeah, totally. So I think that's it. And it's look, and it's not that we like came up with this either. We tried to do the other stuff, and like we realized this is the better way. I think most people just don't think about this shit. You know, they're like, let's just tokenize this thing, bring it on chain. I think if you actually think about like who the fuck is going to use this thing, how are you actually going to make it work? You know, it becomes very quickly. You have to build a liquidity pool. You have to like get people to use it first. It's just like anything in crypto, right? You like once people hold the token, they get it. Now you can do more with it, right? A lot of things like people say, oh, everything is liquidity. That's bullshit. Most things in crypto are not instant liquidity, right? Most things have 7-day withdrawals, 20-day withdrawals, you know, all these
Yes,
kinds of
yes.
stuff, right? But you had to show people first how to do it, and then they get comfortable, and then they're okay with it, right? My TIA is still fucking locked, going to zero, you know, and like you know, it's because I'm too lazy to withdraw from the 21-day, you know. But like you know, people are okay with this stuff, but you have to show them first. It's just inverted in crypto. If you want fast money, you got to be ready to give money first, and then you can build something more material and longer standing.
This is awesome. This is awesome. Is it really true that I can trade sports card and luxuries and stuff like that, even with a leverage on Plume?
That's the idea. Exactly. We have a couple
Dude,
protocols
tell
building it
tell some
now.
more about that. I think people are definitely interested. Like
Totally,
Pokemon
totally.
cards?
Yes, yes, yeah. We have one protocol that you can take out a bunch of leverage on Pokemon cards. We have another one that lets you trade on a bunch of different factors, right? Because like if you take the idea around Pokemon cards as an example, right? Um, and this is our view of RWAs. RWAs today, right, is very much this idea that you're taking something in the real world and making a copy of it on chain. Right. And so it's this, so it very much, even in the symbolism itself, is very much like, oh, we're just rebuilding the real world, right? On a
Yes.
different place. Right. But that's a limiting view of it. I think that's a big part of it for sure. Right. But again, going back to the Pokemon cards, right? What we're trying to do here is abstract that away. If you wanted to actually trade Pokemon cards, there's two approaches, right? One, you can go find every fucking person in the world with Pokemon cards and tokenize them and bring them on chain. That's a fucking pain in the ass. It's slow, right? We're
Yes.
doing that, of course, but that's harder and more fundamental. The other way, right, is there's only a few cards that matter, right? Let's just bring the price feeds for them online, right, on chain, and then build a market around it and let you trade this shit up and down, left and right.
Wait,
This
but
way
like
I
my
can
my
fit.
question is like still like when you say like you making a copy of a physical. For example, I earn one of the world's most prestigious Pokemon card. Like, what
Yep,
does it even mean if I bring this on chain? Because I still hold my physical card, right? Why the
totally.
fuck should someone care about like bring? Did I have to burn my card in physical world to
no,
me?
no. So what you do is look. I think it's a good question, right? Because I think last cycle, a lot of this was like, oh, with 4K or something, right? Oh, like
Yes,
I can like
yes.
pick my Patek, I'll put it on chain, and people can buy shares of it or whatever. I mean, clearly nobody fucking did that, and that's why it went the way it did. Like the way it works is, we tend to focus more on like a trusted custodian, and a trusted custodian is not just you in your garage. You'd have to send your card to like Brinks or some like
Oh,
custodian to like hold this thing and manage it, right? And then there's a bunch of integrations that watch this thing, right? And make sure that it's still there, right? And that it's like represented properly. That's number one. Why would you even do that, right? Mostly because you want to hold like you have to be ready for two things. You have to be ready to actually get rid of it, right? If
okay,
someone wanted to buy and redeem, you have to be able to do that. Right.
okay,
You don't have to though. The other way is you can just make trading fees. People want to hold the interest and hold the value, right? And you'll still hold the card, but all of the money goes elsewhere, right? So if it appreciates in value, you have to buy back at some point, right? If you wanted to, because now someone else holds it, right? And so that's the reason why is like you still want the assets, but you want to make some money on the fees. You're okay with like trading a little bit. And like if someone were to take it, it's okay. Like that ends up being like the story on that side, right? But the other way is this, like, look, that's a lot of work, right?
it
Like you
is,
have to
it is.
trust. It's just a bitch. I know tokenization is backwards because people think of tokenized world is such a fucking pain in the ass. I think most people don't. I don't want to do it.
Because
We
you
do it
have
because
to
we
be
have to.
responsible for the entire process. You have to
Exactly.
design a system around it. Like just
Hundred
tokenizing
percent.
itself doesn't mean shit.
100%. Right. What's way fucking easier, right, is bringing a price feed on. Right. I can use an Oracle, right, and hit fucking 10 different sites that have the card. I normalize the price on chain. And now I can put it into a crypto native format, right? Which is instead of doing all this fucking work to put it into an NFT marketplace, basically, right? That always has like no volume, no usage, right? It just doesn't make sense. Super expensive, slow, no volume. Doesn't make sense, right? Versus the other side, let's bring a price feed on, right? And normalize it and make sure it's not manipulated, all those kind of things, right? And then put it into a crypto native primitive, right? Which is the 1 second chart, right? I can just see this shit go up and down. I can go left and right. I can left long, left short, all those kinds of things, right? And so you can take that analogy even further, right? Because again, instead of tokenizing a card, I'll just build an oracle that pings 15 sites and lets you just trade the price, right? That's all
Oh,
it is, right? And so this way, there's no tokenization at all. You're tokenizing just the price. That's all you're doing, right? And so that to me is the other way of doing RWAs. And that to me, that's the better way. We call RWA perps, right? Which is like you can basically,
dude,
do
I
a
like that.
synthetic version of it that lets you build a market around it. Because if you look at trad markets, right? Every trad market makes an illiquid asset liquid by doing derivatives, right? Derivatives are the only way
100%.
to make this happen, right? Because in derivatives, like, you're trading corn futures. None of those motherfuckers ever actually get the corn. They're just trading the futures, right? They're just, they don't give a fuck about the corn, right? They're just trading corn based on economic conditions, right? It's just another way
Yes.
to gamble, right? And so if you look at this, it's the same thing. Let's just bring the price on, right? And use an exogenous price to drive things right now, right? And that's the way that we think about it, which is then I think the thing that gets really exciting about that is if you take that same example, you can now combine a lot of things together, right? And mix and match. For example, if you take again, like we have one protocol that lets you trade countries, and trade like the sentiment around this thing. So like again, you can long America, you can short Korea, right? And like the way you do that is
Wait,
America,
sentiment. How did you
yes. And so
track sentiment?
it's a bunch of things together, right? But you take like for America, right? What would you do? You would take things like GDP, right? CPI, right? Crime rate, all these types of things, right? And put them in, and then weight them differently, right? And then it creates a chart, right? Now, the problem with that is, right, is sentiment is like these numbers come out once every quarter. They're fucking static. They never change, right? So you have to do sentiment. Like, what is the actual sentiment on this thing? So you take in things like news, you take in things like Twitter, you take in all these things, right? You use AI to sort of weave it out and create a normalized curve around this thing. So you can see, today if the news are going up, like, okay, like this is how I feel about Trump or whatever, I can just trade the Trump token up and down, right? It actually trades a sentiment instead of a liquidity pool, right? That's the idea. And so you can then create new tokenized things that don't exist today. There's no way to tokenize Trump. There's no way to tokenize America, right? We're not
So you
going to
can
tokenize the
tokenize the
fucking G device.
sentiment.
Yes, and you can take a lot of real economic indicators and bake that in as well. So it's both. It's just like equities today, right? Equities are all just a sentiment. That's what it is, right? People are guessing, and so you have a couple bag holders that hold it, and you have a couple that make up the flows, right? Like that's basically what it is, right? And then on a regular basis, people report the earnings, right? You report things like you talk about the balance sheet, you talk about the P&L, you talk about growth, you talk about all these different things like that, and that becomes the fundamental that help drive it. It's not tightly baked into it, right? But you have enough TradFi money and enough solid money that use that as a foundation for their long-term positions that make up a price, right? That's why PE ratios are a thing. That's why all these things are a thing today, right? And so we can use real economic indicators, right, and then build in volatility with sentiment and build in short-term price action, right? But the fundamentals always drive the thing at the end of the day, right? And so you mimic more of a more normal behavior, which you can track. Because sentiment, it's hard to do properly, and so this way you have both. And this is to me how you still have capture the element of the real world, right? Which is, again, I always use WorldCoin as an example. WorldCoin to me is the first version of this, right? WorldCoin, right? No, like it is just Sam Altman. It is a tokenized version of Sam Altman. That's all it is. Like at the end of the day, when Sam gets fired, WorldCoin dumps. When Sam gets rehired, it fucking pumps, right? Sora 2.0 comes out again, it pumps again, right? Like WorldCoin is just tokenized Sam Altman, but it's a very indirect way. We have to pretend we care about this fucking silver orb and these eyeballs and things, but when we really just want to gamble on Sam, right? And so like that's the truth. And so what we're trying to do is just make that a much more direct, right,
There's a more
means of doing
effective
this.
way if you can directly trade sentiment around Sam.
That's right. That's
I
right.
like
That's
that.
right.
Dude, I've
So
seen similar stuff. I think the really beauty of crypto is like it enable all these different kind of market, right?
yep.
My friend is actually building this trading trend marketplace
Yep.
on top of Kaido, so that like
Yeah,
you
I've
can
seen
make
that.
it's super cool stuff.
Yeah,
A
totally.
lot similar to what you were saying. But I
Yes,
do think
exactly.
I'm buying this kind of stuff a lot too. So
Yes, exactly. I think it's very hard to do for what it's worth, right? Because you really need to weight it properly. You need to bring that like the thing about tokens, it's easy. I can look at liquidity pool, I can look at flows and get things done. When you're doing something off of exogenous feed, right, you have to really trust that. And it's hard to understand. It's easy to manipulate. It's hard to do that correctly. So I think it's a big Oracle problem, right? And we're working with a bunch of oracles to figure this out. But I agree. I think that's where things are going. That's what meme coins are today, right? Meme coins are just trading attention, right? That's why every time some news in the world happens, there's fucking 50 tokens that come up about it, right? And you just hope you get the right one, Like even remember Nero and all this shit. There's like fucking 10 Neros, And even there's some on Sol, some on ETH, like fighting each other. It's ridiculous, So anyway, I think it's totally a thing, and to me that's the it's like it's a net new thing now, right? Like meme coins are a way to bring people in. This should be another way to bring people in. Right. If I can trade Sabrina Carpenter, right, or I can trade Dua Lipa, or I can trade whatever the fuck, in a very simple way, and have it map to what's actually going on in the world, right, without it being heavy, then it's a good thing. So,
all right, we're back, and yeah, that's the question that I really wanted to ask. I also ask every single guest of my podcast is, can you please share your Tales of Web3 story, right? The most interesting story throughout your journey in crypto, or probably building Plume, right? It can be about you taking up a huge amount of risk, about you like fundraising. It can be also something like silly. Like I just want people to remember, like this is something that Chris did in the past that also shaped
totally.
who you are today. So the stage is yours.
I think the thing that comes to mind, at least, I don't know if this is where you're going with it, so tell me if not, and I can do something else too. But like the thing that comes to mind, at least, is when I think right now, we're seeing a lot of other people get into RWAs, right? And a lot of other projects and a lot of people, like some serious, some not, it's classic crypto, a lot of fucking grifting. But a lot of people getting into it too, right? I think the thing that at least I remember from all this is, even Teddy and myself and Eugene, like for a long time, we were just like, "Ah, is it real? Is it not? Is it good? Is it going to work? Is it not? All these sorts of things. And, I think the benefit for us was that we were earlier to this than some. Not the earliest either, but we were earlier to it than some. And I think, being rooted in like what the ultimate goal was, which is to grow crypto, right? And that's, it takes shape in how we build this today, which is very, modular, it's ecosystem focused, right? It's very focused on growing the whole community, not just crypto. And so I think, the thing that I always remember with this is a lot of these motherfuckers like will will try to tell you that it's wrong or it's stupid or this approach or this, and like actually that's the best way to go with it, because I think it's easy to say, but the consensus ideas are usually bad ones, you know
I agree.
um and usually either at that point there's too much competition, or it's like mispriced, meaning there's not enough alpha left to go do it, right? And all these things. And so I think, to me, at least the lesson from a lot of the Plume stuff that I've seen is, when we look at all these things today, the rule that we've always had still holds true, which is you want to be in a market that is small today that is going to be big in the future, right? You want to be coming at it from a different perspective than others, right? And basically, you want to play a different game that you can win versus play someone else's game. And then I think the third thing is, the truth is, when you do that, 99% of people think you're retarded, and won't believe you, or just kind of don't understand, and a lot of people tell you you're wrong. Now, I think the dangerous thing is, a lot of times when people tell you you're wrong, it's because you're fucking wrong, and so like there's a lot of dead bodies on the path of going down this road, as well. But when it's right, it is right, and so I think that to me is the focus, which is like, I think a lot of people end up, especially in crypto, trying to chase like short-term hype, or trying to chase like something happening right now. And I think by the time you do that, it's just too late. You have to do something
100%.
that's coming up, and the thing we always liked about RWA is like it's a more long-lasting and durable narrative behind this thing. Is what we thought. There's a longer runway for this, and so that's kind of that's probably my biggest takeaway from this whole thing, and like the thing that like I've really like taken away from this, which is, if people think it's going to work, it's probably not. And if people think it's a good idea, it's probably not. And if people are generally very hyped, it's probably not. It's probably not a good thing. Which again, there's plenty of counterexamples. These things are not all one size fits all. But at least going to at least our experience with it so far is, I've had a million people grift us. Like we've created more people that are trying to copy our shit and take our story than I think anybody else. And the difference is, we were rooted in the more fundamentals we're trying to do, which is grow crypto, not just attach an RWA store to something, right? Which is focus on the longer term, which is harder to do in this case, because it's easier to go grift a BlackRock story, or go like grift some nonsense and get a headline and move on. But that's not the fundamental way to do it, right? And again, like we still work with all the big instos too, so we're not free of blame here, but it's different than a lot of the other people do it as well. So I think that's the end of the day. Like, what is it? And I would say, look, maybe like the last thing, the most interesting thing I think is like, when we took the token out, I guess, and it was just a unique time where I think we had planned to kind of go out the day after the inauguration, right? Because we're very sort of like, Plumerica. It's, this
Nice.
whole fucking thing around Trump and all this kind of stuff, right? And I remember the Friday before was a crypto ball, right? And we've got everything lined up, a bunch of stuff together and everything, right? And of course, that evening, right, Trump launches a shitcoin, and just like sucks all the fucking
Oh my
activity out of the
God.
exchanges. And so then every exchange starts to panic. They're like, fuck, there's not enough liquidity. Everyone's pulling money out to go gamble on Solana. Like, what's going to happen? All this kind of stuff, right? And at that time, there were three tokens that were still up, right? They were all the RWA tokens, right? Everything is down but RWAs, because the RWA is still a positive story despite the whole thing. And so that was still positive. And so we were like, okay, we're okay. Everyone chill the fuck out. It's going to be all right, right? I think the next day, though, the second plane hits the tower, right? And
Yeah.
the Melania token goes out, right? And
Yes.
like takes everything again, and I think at that point, then it really all starts to go to hell, and a lot of things that we had planned all start to change. The arena shifts, and we're like 24 hours out from TG at that point, right?
Yes.
And there were two things to do at that point. One, which a lot of people told us to go do, which is wait. You should push. It's too tricky right now. The market's not good. You don't know what's going on. All of these things are happening, and it's better to hold and see what happens. And I talked to a lot of founders today who are trying to take the token out or trying to think about this stuff and like just timing in general, right? And my view is this, in hindsight, and again, these things are always have hindsight bias, so I don't know if this is true across the board, but the thing I would say we were grateful for is like, I think we stuck to our guns, which is, look, this is the story. We think this is a long-term game, and I care less about day one price action, and I care less about these things, and I care more about like long-term and where this thing is going. And more importantly, we care about getting this out for the community as well, so people can kind of grow with us and see what's happening versus having everything happen in the private markets. Because so to me, that's like the other thing to take away from all this, which is like, same thing, which is like everyone told us to do ABC, we decided not to. Everyone said XYZ, we decided not to. And look, especially like when you watch these things, you can get tempted to do the wrong things as well, right? Because it's very tricky not to. And I think, despite all of that, again, rooted in what we wanted to do, which is like, we wanted to go out at this time to match this story because we thought it was the right time. We think that it's the right thing for our like product and overall strategy, right? And so, I see so many people trying to contort themselves into whatever else is going on, and they have so many masters who are telling them you got to do this, and like it fucks your shit up. And so I stay rooted into what we're supposed to do, what you're trying to do, and let everything else happen on the other side in the way it should happen, right? And things will like normalize into the way they should. And so I think that's what takeaways. It goes in the same idea, which is like, know what you want, know what you're doing, right? And fuck everybody else, and try and do what you think is right for the business versus being a slave to everything else,
This is awesome.
But yeah.
I love people who are highly opinionated. Like, these are definitely less than 1% of the population, but like,
yes,
dude, I love that story. Definitely one of my best. So thanks for sharing the story.
Of course.
One last question before I let you go.
Yeah,
please share hard on Plume. What are some exciting stuff that are coming up on the roadmap that people should be tuned in?
Look, everyone's been asking, and like I get pinged on this fucking every other day is when's mainnet, and so and it's true, like it's a real question, and like look, it's coming soon. That's the thing. I'd say mainnet is right around the corner, and I think that the difference is also like compared to other things where usually there's a big mainnet launch, a bunch of fucking things going on, a huge push, right? I think more similar to our story is, look, I want to let this thing come out progressively, right? And we want to let things bleed. So I think in front of us, mainnet's right around the corner, but it will be different than how others are done, right? And it will be it'll be done more in a light. I think RWAs are a story that people need to get used to, and they need to get familiar with, right? And teach people how to use this thing, right? And so that's the first thing, right? We'll show people, and so mainnet's coming around the corner. I think number two is there's tons of new partnerships and like announcements that are coming around the corner as well with big financial institutions, with like people across in different countries and everything like that. So a ton of new like things coming that way. I think the third thing that's most exciting is, as a result, again, the story of Plume is always this: we want to turn the real world into tokens, right? And once everything is tokens, right, because we think the token is a superior format, right? Once you have tokens, then the real world and crypto start to blur. It's all the same thing at that point, right?
Yes.
And once that happens, it's going to fucking sing, right? Because now you can create new financial tools. And it's just like what we said earlier, right? When you have permissionless innovation in crypto native assets, people go there and they fuck around and do crazy shit, and it becomes awesome, right? And we want to do the exact same thing for reward assets and get the mixing up. So I'd see the world is blending together. And so step one for sure is mainnet. A bunch of these partners are about bringing a bunch of shit in the real world on chain. We've got crazy shit. You've got durian farms. You've got camel racing. You've got, oil and solar and gas and, gold and diamonds and uranium and all kinds of stuff. Right? That's the starting point, right? And then once we get there, it's about all these new financial primitives and tools to kind of mix and match and put these things together in new ways. And so there's a bunch of stuff coming there, like, this culture stuff, right? Trading America, shorting Korea, all these things are like examples of what we can do here. And so I think the exciting thing is we'll have a bunch of new dApps coming out, mainnet's coming soon, right? A bunch of like great announcements and things are coming out. And so this way, I think it's worth exploring, and we'll have more to come soon.
Let's go. Let's fucking go. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. And here we wrap up the Tales of Web3 Season 3, Episode 15 with Chris, the co-founder CEO of Plume Network. Thank you, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks for having me today. It was a blast, and appreciate it.